So as you would have seen from the trailer, out of control rogue AI is part of our cultural imagination. From films like Mercy with Chris Pratt, whose trailer we just saw, to the iconic Terminator movie starring Arnold "I'll be back" Schwarzenegger, where the US Defense Artificial Intelligence program called Skynet becomes self-aware and nukes humanity, to Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, for those of us that are a bit older. Now, when it came to watching movies like Terminator and A Space Odyssey, these movies were entertaining. You went to the movie cinema, you ate the popcorn, you had the choc top, and you just thought, wow, this is entertaining, this is interesting, but boy, am I glad this is not my reality. It was pure fantasy. But all that changed in late 2022. What was once fantasy, what was once pure science fiction, is now considered a possibility, and by some, a probability. And that shift in thinking took place, of course, late 2022 when ChatGPT and other generative AI came online. And so we now have generative AI, the chatbots, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, and so forth, that can code, that can write HSC level and university level essays and assignments, that can seem, well, almost human as you interact with it. And so all sorts of people have begun making all sorts of predictions about what comes next. And many of these predictions, I've got to say, are kind of terrifying. From tech CEOs, they're the worst offenders in my opinion. Tech CEOs like Microsoft AI's Mustafa Suleyman predicting that within 18 months, all knowledge work, that is all office jobs, jobs in front of a computer, will be able to be done by AI. So what happens to your job if you're in an office? What happens to my job? I guess it's okay if you're a tradie, maybe we'll all become tradies. Two, even more disturbingly, a predictive report called AI 2027, which came out last year, and around April of last year. And if you don't want to sleep for a week, if you want to have AI-fueled nightmares, then I recommend reading the report. It predicts that AI will be able to program and improve itself from next year, hence the name AI 2027. And one of the human authors predicts a 70% chance of our losing control of this rapidly improving AI and it wiping out humanity by 2035. So that's 70%, not harming humanity in some way, 70% chance that it might harm us, 70% likelihood of AI wiping us all off the face of the earth. Talk about doom and gloom. Now, of course, the people who are gloomy about AI are known as doomers, not boomers, doomers. But on the flip side, there's a lot of optimism as well from people known as accelerationists who think AI is going to solve all our problems and usher in an era of incredible health, wealth, and prosperity. And often it's the same tech CEOs also making these more positive predictions as well. And so what about you? How do you feel about AI? Does AI excite you? Is it something that you think, wow, the world has just gotten so much more interesting? Or does it make you somewhat scared or anxious? Or perhaps you've tried using AI, maybe you've prompted it and it didn't do such a great job and you're thinking, what's all the fuss about? Why is everybody going on about this AI? Well, tonight we're going to have a think about what the Bible might have to say about AI. And so we'll look at AI from a Christian perspective. And to do that, we'll do what theologian John Stott, an English theologian, called double listening. And so this is what double listening is. He says, we are called to the difficult and even painful task of double listening. That is, we are to listen carefully, although of course with different degrees of respect, both to the ancient word, the Bible, and to the modern world, in order to relate the one to the other with a combination of fidelity and sensitivity. So to put it simply, we're to understand the world, in this case AI, what it is, and then on the flip side, we're to listen to God's word. What does it have to say about technology and about us as human beings and as made in his image? And then apply that to AI. So by the end of tonight, my hope is that you'll have a very simple but powerful biblical lens through which you can look at and understand AI. Does that make sense? All right, so let's start by looking at AI. And for this, I'm going to step down. And Sam, do you want to come up? And no. Or rather, some key features of AI. And Sam, you can correct me afterwards if you want. But this will just give you a broad brush overview because I'm guessing there's a lot of people, a diversity of understandings here. So please bear with me if you're thinking this is way too simple. Okay, so when it comes to AI technology is not new. Social media programs, you may know, such as Instagram and TikTok, have been using AI to figure out what content the users like, so as to keep them engaged. You know, the algorithm, if you like kitten videos, then they'd feed you more kitten videos until you ended up in kitten heaven. But since the end of 2022, the most obvious forms of AI that we interact with, some of us on a daily basis, are chatbots like ChatGPT and Claude. Now, what's allowed AI to develop so much is this thing called machine learning. What sets AI apart so much is machine learning, which as the name suggests, is a computer program that's able to learn. So to give you an example of this, in 2015, Google gave an AI one of these 80s Atari video games. Yeah, the Gen Xers, hands up, 80s video games. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And it was just told, learn how to play it. It's one of these simple ones where you're meant to shoot things that are coming down from the top of the screen. Or actually, no, it was bouncing balls and hitting bricks at the top of the screen. Now, around 10 minutes of training, it's still hopeless at playing it. It's like you give a toddler it and it just doesn't know what it's doing. But after 2 hours, it's playing like an expert. After 4 hours, something amazing happens. It develops a new technique that has never been used before in the game to get the maximum score in minimum time. How were the Google engineers able to get this computer program to play like this? By developing an AI that could learn, machine learning. And as I mentioned, machine learning is what sets AI apart from ordinary computer programs like Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Outlook, Microsoft Word. Ordinary computer programs can only do what you program them to do, whereas AI can learn and gain new skills that it didn't have before, all by itself. Machine learning. Next thing we need to understand about AI is the difference between narrow intelligence and general intelligence. And so let's start with this idea of intelligence. What is intelligence? Well, there's no one fully agreed on definition, but I think one definition that works well is the intelligence is the ability to accomplish complex goals like reading, writing, playing chess, playing computer game. And so artificial intelligence is the ability of a machine to accomplish those goals. Now, here's the thing. We need to understand that there are two types of AI intelligence. Narrow intelligence is the idea that your AI can accomplish a very narrow set of goals, like playing a computer game, but can't do much else. General intelligence is the ability to accomplish any goal that a human can do, such as learning and driving and reading and writing and whatever else your average human can do. And so when it comes to artificial intelligence, this is known as artificial general intelligence, or AGI. You might have heard that term bandied around. And AGI is the holy grail of AI companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and Google and so forth. Human level intelligence, that's what they want. It's what they're working towards. For others, AGI, human level intelligence, is a potential nightmare, as per the AI 2027 report. And the fear is that such powerful AI will not only program itself to be more powerful, but also be hard for us to control. I mean, how do you control something that has an IQ of 6,000? Normally, if you've got an IQ of 120, whatever it might be, it's going to be very hard to control, so the thinking goes. Having said that, having just raised your blood pressure, we don't know if AI will ever be as intelligent as human beings. AI researchers are divided on whether it's even possible to develop human-level intelligence, as I mentioned, AGI, and if so, when it might occur. So a few years ago, researchers were asked, and a number of them said sometime middle of this century. If it's going to happen at all, it'll happen sometime around 2050. But since ChatGPT came online, many top AI company CEOs like OpenAI's Sam Altman or Elon Musk have become very, very bullish in their predictions, with Elon believing human-level AI will be with us in 2030, which, ladies and gentlemen, is in 4 years' time. Now, there's a lot of talk out there about AI in the media, and a lot of things have been said about it, as you can imagine. And so there are two key narratives around AI that I see that's about AI and where it's headed. And so narrative one on the slide there is to see AI advancement like the rising waters of a flood inside a valley. And key human abilities are like different points at the valley. So near the bottom, you have some more simpler human abilities like playing chess. Not that it's simple, but it's something that AI has been able to do and conquer. A little further up on the valley side, you have like being able to describe a random image or video, which AI couldn't do until, about a decade ago or so. And as AI has developed, as the waters have risen, as it were, AI has become able to do that. Further up, you have being able to write a HSC level essay. The AI waters have been rising to be able to do that. And so in this narrative, and I see it's a very common narrative, AI is becoming increasingly all-round intelligent until the waters rise to the very top of the valley and it becomes as intelligent as you and I. Again, that's the narrative from the top tech CEO, Sam Altman, Dario Amodei, Demis Hassabis, or the AI 2027 report authors. And of course, this is what fuels a lot of the anxiety that you're probably feeling. AI is going to take over. But there's a different narrative, and I think this is the minority narrative, but it's the narrative that I'm starting to believe more and more. And it's to say that AI development is more like a river with many smaller rivers feeding into it. And so these small side rivers represent particular specific abilities that AI can be used for. So there's a small river, that's coding. AI is being used very effectively for coding, as Sam mentioned. There's another small river for writing. AI is being used very effectively to write HSC level assignments and so forth. Another small river for processing large amounts of data and so on. But there are some rivers that it hits the AI river and you go up and it doesn't really work. AI is not really good for that. It doesn't lead anywhere. And so in this narrative, AI will really only ever be good at some tasks and do them really well, coding, maths, playing chess, writing, and so forth, but a very limited use for other tasks, e.g. coming up with completely new ideas, spatial and physical reasoning. Now, the caveat I should put on this is that is based on the large AI models that we're accustomed to, such as ChatGPT, Claude, and so forth. If a new, totally different type of AI were developed, this reasoning might go out the window. But I'm talking about large language models, your chatbots that you use. This is the sort of thinking of people like Cal Newport, an author and Georgetown University computer science professor, who runs a very good podcast called the AI Reality Check. And if you're nervous about AI, check it out, the AI Reality Check, Cal Newport. And so as such, he doesn't think we'll get to anything like all-round general intelligence. And he writes off the AI 2027 report as misguided fear-mongering. I'll tell you what, my blood pressure dropped a great deal after hearing what he had to say about it. And so the record, I happen to think that I think he's on the money. Okay, so we've looked at AI briefly. Now we're going to pivot and look to what the Bible might have to say about it. So, Bible and AI. Now, we've had a few activities. Here's an activity for you. Can anyone give me chapter and verse from the Bible that discusses AI? Hezekiah chapter 7, verse 1? No? That's right. It doesn't mention AI directly at all. But the Bible, surprisingly, this might surprise you, does have a lot of things to say about technology in general. And so once we figure out what the Bible might have to say about technology, we can apply this to AI, since obviously AI is a form of technology. And so to figure out what the Bible says about technology, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a very broad sweep through the Bible, through the Bible's key turning points. So at the very beginning of the Bible, we have creation, and then the fall, when humanity rebelled against God. Then Jesus' first coming, when he arrived on the scene 2,000 years ago, and then Jesus' second coming, which will happen sometime in the future. And so we'll use those turning points of creation, fall, coming of Jesus, and the new creation to give us some profound insights about technology. All right, so let's begin with creation. In Genesis 2:15, sorry for the small font there, we read, "The Lord God then took the man Adam and settled him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and care for it." So as you might have heard in the Bible reading as well, God gave Adam this role to look after the garden, care for it, cultivate it. But how was he going to do that? Was he just going to use his bare hands forever? You know, who's that dude on Gardening Australia, Costa? I don't know if he just uses his bare hands, I guess not. But what about if Adam had to cross a river? A number of rivers were mentioned, weren't they, in Genesis chapter 2? Or was he just going to continually swim over the river? Once he was going to develop a family and populate the earth, was he going to say to the millions of other humans, come on, let's swim across the river? Theologians look at this and say that in his God-given role of multiplying and ruling the world, he would have to do things like build a bridge if he were to cross a river. He'd have to build roads. He'd have to build tools if he were going to cultivate the garden. There's no expectation in Genesis chapter 2 that he's going to live like a hippie using his hands and nothing else. You can't rule the world with your bare hands or have millions of people crossing rivers just by swimming. So in short, from the beginning, Adam's role was to take the raw materials of the natural world, what God had made, the rocks, wood, iron ore, that sort of thing, and to fashion it into something else. Axes, bridges, roads, that sort of thing. And so there we see the very beginnings of technology. And so one definition theologians have come with is that technology is the human activity of using our minds, bodies, and tools to transform God's creation for practical purposes. Bit of a mouthful, but basically it's about taking God's creation and transforming it for our use. And if you look around, we are in a building full of technology. In fact, the building is technology as well. But transforming rocks and woods to roads and bridges, in Adam's case. And so here's the bottom line when it comes to creation. Technology as a whole is God's good gift to us, to humanity. A good thing for humanity to use. Now, the other thing to notice is that there's a moral and physical order to creation. At the top of the order, we have God, the overall ruler. He was the one that put Adam in the garden. Underneath God, we have humanity made in God's image, ruling the world, ruling the garden under God. And underneath humanity is the rest of creation, animal, plants, valleys, oceans. God at the top, humanity underneath, and the rest of creation underneath us. So what this means is we're not meant to tell God what to do. And the rest of creation, including the technology we build, is not meant to rule over us, just like we're not meant to tell God what to do. And we'll unpack this a bit later on. But the bottom line, technology is God's good design. All right, moving on, the fall. What about the fall where Adam and Eve rebelled against God's rightful rule? Well, the two things we need to note. Firstly, that order that I just mentioned of God, humanity, and creation gets reversed as humanity disobeys God by listening to the serpent, by listening to a creature. And from that moment on, the world is fallen and broken. And what happens to humanity's use of technology now that we're fallen, sinful creatures? Well, in places like Genesis chapter 11, if you know the Tower of Babel story, we see humanity misusing technology. So in Genesis chapter 11, a few chapters after the creation account, we see humanity wanting to build a tower to make a name for themselves. So they idolize technology, using it to live without God as king. And technology can also be used in other ways for evil. Cain killing Abel. We have the first murder within a couple of chapters of the Bible, presumably with some implements involved. And we see this in modern times as well. So, for example, trains can take refugees to a safe part of a country, but the self-same technology trains can take Jews to Auschwitz. Good and evil. That's the way technology can be used now that we live in a fallen world. But here's something else about technology, something critical. Technology itself is now embedded with values that are not always aligned with God's values. So let me unpack that, because I think this is critical if we're to understand technology. All technology is designed for a purpose. The seat you're sitting on, the building we're in, it's all designed for a particular purpose. And so it influences the user to behave in a way that achieves the purpose. So the chair, what is it influencing you to do? It's influencing you to sit down and to relax, to be comfortable. And so let's take the technology of a, here we go. All right, so let's take the technology of a car versus the technology of a bicycle. Both are forms of transport. Both will take you from A to B. But they have very different designs, and those designs will shape the user in particular ways. So if you travel in a car to work, what's the underlying value that designers of a car try to build into a car? Well, the comfort, ease, speed, all these sorts of values that they try and build in, convenience. And so those values of comfort and convenience are going to shape your body as you use it very differently than if you rode to work on a bicycle. So what are the underlying values of a bicycle? What's a key value of a bicycle design? Pedals, which means that it's up to you to use it. It's human powered, which means that that will shape you because you're using physical effort to get from A to B, unlike with a car. So the technology shapes the user. And so since the fall, technology is now embedded with values that are antithetical to God's values. And thus the use of such technology, coupled with our sinful desires, can really shape us in very negative and sinful directions. And so we're going to think about how AI can do that to us in just a moment. Okay, so the first coming of Jesus. In the New Testament, we see technology being used to help bring about God's salvation. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but God uses technology to bring people to himself. And we see that through the use of writing. Quite obviously, the Bible, the apostles, the gospel writers wrote down what Jesus said and their own God-inspired words. The apostle Paul, to take the gospel to the Mediterranean world, what did he use? What sort of technology did he use for that? Ships, boats, traveling on horseback, that sort of thing. Spread the gospel. And of course, there's one key technology that was used to bring people, for God to bring people to himself. Does anyone know what that piece of technology is? Absolutely. Biggest use of technology in the Bible, the center of God's plan, is the technology of the cross. Yes, it's a very barbaric technology, but the technology of the cross was used by God to bring about his purposes to save the world. I don't know if you've ever thought about that, but technology was key to God's plan to save humanity. Now, of course, technology can also be used to mitigate the effects of the fall, such as medicine, clothing, houses, to help people who are suffering. And we see that New Testament commands to love your neighbor, to provide for those that haven't got much, the Jericho Road and so forth. We see examples of technology being used to mitigate suffering. And so we Christians need to think about using technology in a God-centered, neighbor-loving way. What about the new creation then, as we come towards the end of the talk? Well, Jesus won't return through the power of technology. Our technology won't usher in the new heavens and the new earth. God will do it through the resurrection of creation and our bodies when Jesus returns to judge the world. No human technology need be involved in that. And this has implications for what we put our hope in. So many AI proponents are extremely positive about our future, including things like giving us cyborg bodies, getting rid of our flesh so we don't die. That sort of thing. But according to the Bible, our hope is not in AI replacing our bodies and making us live forever, let alone being uploaded into some cloud, but in the resurrection of all things when Jesus returns. Okay, now we're going to come to the back end of the talk. We're going to bring this together. But before we do that, we need to explore the idea further that technology shapes us. And the first thing we need to realize is that we're shaped by technology in ways we often fail to notice. And so technology has a lot of built-in values, which we explored a moment ago, that it's not value neutral, but it shapes the user as they use the technology. But many of these values that shape you as you use your technology, they're hidden, they're not obvious. And it's these hidden values within technology that can subtly reshape our minds and hearts in ways that conflict with God's design. So social media is a classic example. Social media, remember the grand dream of Zuckerberg's Facebook to bring the world together? How's that been going? The technology of social media is built in to give you content that you like. And so what happens then? You get more content that you like and more content that you like, so you stay on. And what ends up happening to a population? People get siloed into content that they like, and we become more and more disconnected and polarized. That's a value that is shaping us. Or more on a more individual level, social media encourages shallow narcissism, sometimes not so shallow narcissism, by prioritizing online self-presentation, selfies at the beach with arms flexed to show your biceps. And you might not even notice that it's shaping you that way until years later. Next, technology often wears its benefits on its sleeves, and the tech CEOs love trumpeting those benefits from the rooftops. But the drawbacks are buried deep within, similar to the previous points. But that means that these drawbacks only emerge with extended use. And you don't realize how much vainer you've become from posting selfies on Instagram until many months or years later. And so what does all this mean? It means that when it comes to technology, we need to experiment with technology carefully and take time to reflect to uncover the potential downsides, those values that are shaping us that aren't always obvious. And then we need to make informed choices about our habits as we use technology. Or to put it simply, our task as Christians is disciplined discernment. We need to discern to uncover the advantages and the disadvantages of technology, including AI. We need to uncover and make the most of the advantages, and there's lots of advantages of technology, while uncovering and mitigating against the disadvantages. And we do this by experimenting with the technology, reflecting on its impact on us, and then changing our use of our technology accordingly. A lot of trial and error involved, and obviously other people can help us with that. Disciplined discernment. And so Mike asked me in the interview, what's one thing you could take away tonight? If you take nothing else away, if you've been sleeping, now's a good time to wake up. This is the thing, disciplined discernment when it comes to technology. And so for me, I occasionally blog, and this has meant experimenting with ChatGPT and blog writing. And look, it can do a very decent job, especially actually Claude now these days more so, in writing a blog. I got it to write a blog post for me, and it did really well. It was one of the few blog posts in the year that went viral. But here's what I found after I did that a while. I found that generating entire blog posts using ChatGPT or Claude, it was actually defeating the purpose of my blogging. You see, I write in order to think, in order to process, in order to make sense of what's going on around me and around the world. And AI short-circuited that process. It defeated the very reason why I was doing it. Because one underlying value of generative AI is to do our thinking for us, which is why it's called artificial intelligence. And while that value may have a place, a very good place in many areas of life, I certainly didn't want that value to shape me as I blog. It defeats all the purpose of my blogging. So I don't use it for generating blog content. Occasionally use it for editing. It works well for that. But the point is, I tried it out. I experimented with it. I reflected. I thought, how did this feel? What did it do to me? What's the impact? And then I changed my use accordingly. Disciplined discernment. Now, if you are serious about disciplined discernment when it comes to AI, especially in the area of work, I highly recommend a new book called Wise AI, Using Powerful Technology in a Deeply Human Way. The authors, Australians, are friends of mine, and they provide a framework for using AI in a way that makes the most of its benefits while mitigating against the harms of AI. Grab it off Amazon, Wise AI. Okay, now let's get to the point where the rubber really hits the road. Let's explore particular applications of AI using this framework. And so what we can do is start by asking, what other values of AI does AI have that could shape us as we use it? Here are some other areas that we need to think about. Just like AI can simulate human thought, AI can also simulate human speech and thus human connection. So some of you may remember the film from the early 2000s called Her, starring Scarlett Johansson as the voice of the AI and Joaquin Phoenix. I don't know how to pronounce his first name. But what was sci-fi back in the early 2000s is now a daily reality, with many people, including young people and teenagers, having AI companions, even AI boyfriends and girlfriends. And I'm guessing that probably doesn't come as a surprise, particularly to the Gen Zs here in this room. AI can simulate human connection. But here's the thing. Such connection is inherently dehumanizing. Remember when we looked at creation and we looked at the creation order, God, us, creation below it? We're designed by God to connect as human beings to other human beings, to other image bearers. Connecting with a chatbot as if it's a human is inherently dehumanizing and harmful because it upends God's good creation order. And there'll be some very nasty impacts that come out of that, which I'm guessing some of you might become more aware of. Second thing that AI can do is it can simulate moral thinking and decision making. And so this has massive implication in areas like warfare. And so the question is, should autonomous AI-driven drones and other weapons be used that can assess a target based on AI and then of its own decision making decide to kill them? Or closer to home, we have the promise of autonomous self-driving vehicles that promise to make our roads much safer. And I think the argument is very strong that they will probably, once the technology matures, assuming it matures, it could well make our roads much safer. But there may well be times, in fact, there will probably be times when they will need to decide, as in the AI driving the car will need to decide who lives and who dies, such as when a kid runs across the road and the autonomous vehicle needs to swerve and hit an innocent bystander instead. Should we outsource these life and death decisions to AI? Like in the movie Mercy, whose trailer we saw, where AI judges act as judge, jury, and executioner. Sounds extremely efficient, doesn't it? If you've had anything to do with the court system, you know how inefficient it is. From a biblical lens, it's only human beings, God's image bearers, that have the God-given authority and accountability to make moral decisions about others. Saw that in Genesis 2, Romans chapter 2, if you want another place where it explicitly describes this. From a biblical perspective, machines, our created objects, should not make moral decisions about humans. That's distorting God's good creation order, which we looked at when we explored what creation has to say about technology. And if you distort God's good creation order, inevitably, sooner or later, you're going to cause harm and dehumanization. Okay, so let's finish up. At the start of my talk, I mentioned the increasing levels of anxiety many people have about the future of AI. From mass job displacement to possible human extinction. There's a lot to fear out there. But we Christians, we are not people of fear. We're people of faith. Faith in a God who holds the whole world, including AI, in his infinitely good and capable hands. And so with the Apostle Paul, we don't need to live in fear. To paraphrase the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 8 about our amazing future because what Jesus has done for us, we read, "For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything else in all creation, including AI, will be able to separate us from the love of God that is in Christ Jesus our Lord." And so the second thing I want you to take away from tonight is you don't need to be filled with terror. People all around society are losing their heads. I don't know if you heard, but there have been people that have tried to firebomb Sam Altman's house. He's the CEO of the company that runs ChatGPT. We can be clear-minded as we think about AI. And so in particular, we can remember that AI can become a wonderful servant as long as it strengthens and enhances our humanity, but it's a terrible master if we outsource things that only humans should do. And disciplined discernment will allow us to what are those things that allow us to work those things out. Disciplined discernment, both at an individual level, discerning and making most of the good, while discerning and mitigating the bad of AI, but also at a corporate level, as schools, churches, workplaces, and society in general. AI is not inevitable. It depends on us, and so let's choose wisely. Thank you.